On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank.
Welcome to the African Union Journal, your weekly rendezvous on news around the African Union. This edition focuses on mobilizing internal and alternative resources to strengthen Africa's resilience to global shocks. We will also examine the new strategic partnership between France and South Africa, which now formalizes diplomatic and economic relations between the two nations, as well as structural efforts needed to strengthen the continent's stability. To strengthen resilience to global shocks, Africa must actively mobilize its internal and alternative resources. This strategy is the key lever to energizing the African private sector, an essential engine for autonomous and sustainable growth. Sarah Ajay.
Gathered around the issue of African trade resilience in a multipolar global environment, financial and institutional stakeholders are calling for better allocation of resources toward job-creating and value-generating sectors. The objective to transform the continent's economic growth into tangible opportunities for its people and the private sector. When we mobilize more resources through the architecture, we must ensure that the sectors in which these resources are invested are sectors that create even more jobs on the continent. African economies remain vulnerable to global shocks. According to the World Bank, sub-Saharan Africa's growth was expected to reach 3.8% in 2025, but this remains insufficient given the employment challenge. To strengthen their resilience, countries are focusing on diversifying financing sources, particularly through domestic resources, private investment, and alternative mechanisms such as Islamic finance. We can work directly with governments to accelerate the disbursement of operations to address any emergency crisis. If necessary, we can mobilize long-term project development. This could be operations, projects, or other investment operations. These new financial instruments should enable African states to better respond to crises and support strategic sectors such as infrastructure, energy, and agriculture. In 2025, the Islamic Development Bank increased its financing approvals to nearly $16 billion compared with $6.8 billion in 2020, with approximately $11 billion in disbursement to support vulnerable economies. Islamic finance is here. It is part of the toolkit. It is not the only solution. We should stop viewing it as an alternative to conventional financing. Rather, it is part of the available financing toolkit. In a global context marked by a growing number of crises, Africa is therefore seeking to strengthen its own economic resilience capacities. The priority is now to better mobilize available resources, attract more private investment, and direct financing towards sectors capable of creating sustainable jobs. This strategy is presented as essential to making the continent a more autonomous player in the global economy.
Faced with global economic turbulence, harmonizing African voices is becoming imperative. Intellectual cooperation between institutions is essential to anticipate shocks and defend common positions aimed at structurally transforming our economies. Marie Rafaela Tulo.
Faced with the fragmentation of international trade, geopolitical tensions, and the recurrence of economic shocks, Africa is demonstrating remarkable resilience. While the continent faces structural challenges, including GDP per capita growth contained at 1.9% and financing needs estimated at $1.3 trillion, its fundamentals remain solid. In 2026, the continent's average growth is expected to reach 4.4% according to the African Development Bank projections, driven by the dynamic performance of 22 countries exceeding the 5% threshold. gathered in Abidjan from 10 to 12 July 2026. Participants at the African Economic Conference 2026 nevertheless stressed that this momentum cannot be sustained without increased intellectual convergence. The priority for decision makers is now clear: to unify analysis, pull statistical data, and promote the emergence of endogenous economic knowledge designed by and for Africa.
Les défis.
Beyond theoretical frameworks, this harmonization requires a change in governance methods. The Abidjan debate highlighted the imperative of moving beyond fragmented management of public policies. The coherent articulation of budgetary, trade, industrial, climate, and debt management strategies now appears to be the indispensable lever for maximizing the effectiveness of reforms and protecting African economies against exogenous shocks.
Politique.
The challenges facing our economies are becoming increasingly interconnected. Financial volatility, financial fragmentation, climate change, pandemics, and other environmental developments mean that countries can no longer operate in isolation. Cross-border challenges are evolving faster than our policy-making process. Moreover, while many of these shocks originate from external factors, they are amplified by our structural weaknesses.
Le réseau des économies centrales africaines.
Africa needs not only better national policies but also stronger collective economic intelligence. We need stronger analytical capacity, better evidence-based data sharing, improved identification of emerging risks, and closer coordination among the stakeholders responsible for shaping economic policies across our continent.
La ZLECAf.
The situation is unequivocal. Economic policies, too long developed in silos or modeled on exogenous frameworks, sometimes struggle to respond to interconnected global crises. This structural vulnerability is manifested by a projected inflation of 10.4% for 2026 and a median public debt ratio of around 60% of GDP. The goal is therefore to design adapted interpretive frameworks free from dogma, sometimes disconnected from realities on the ground. This political and intellectual ambition has materialized with the launch of the African Chief Economist Network. This strategic platform now brings together the continent's high-level decision-making sphere, presidential advisors, central bank governors, high-ranking ministerial officials, and think tank directors around a single mandate to build scientific sovereignty and produce cutting-edge expertise in service of Africa's development.
The African Economic Network will serve as a platform for developing innovative solutions that are essential for Africa to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 as well as the African Union's Agenda 2063. It will help develop fiscal tools capable of withstanding climate shocks and optimizing public financial capacity as well as employment models that will transform our region into a global engine of productivity.
Egypt deepens its maritime alliance in the Horn of Africa through a memorandum of understanding with Somalia. This agreement marks a major strategic step in securing and fostering regional cooperation in the heart of a maritime zone vital to the continent. Philomen Tine.
The federal government of Somalia has formalized a memorandum of understanding (MOU) with Egypt on maritime transport and port development following the port connectivity agreement between Cairo and Eritrea. The protocol establishes a framework for cooperation to develop port infrastructure, modernize maritime transport, strengthen institutional capacity, and support Somalia's national transformation plan. The agreement also reinforces a strategic corridor stretching from the Gulf of Suez to the Gulf of Aden. Somalia is one of the most strategically important countries in the Horn of Africa because of its geographic location, facing the major maritime routes linking Africa and Asia. Through these agreements, it is seeking to strengthen its cooperation with Egypt, particularly to counterbalance Ethiopia's influence amid ongoing regional tensions. Several foreign powers are also looking to establish or expand military bases in Somalia because of its strategic location. This new regional architecture is unfolding against a backdrop of growing rivalry between Egypt and Ethiopia. Addis Ababa accuses Cairo of pursuing a strategy of encirclement aimed at limiting Ethiopia's access to the Red Sea. This rivalry is further compounded by the long-standing dispute over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, reinforcing the perception of an Egypt-Eritrea-Somalia strategy as is capable of exerting diplomatic, economic, and military pressure on Addis Ababa. Beyond the agreements concluded between Egypt, Eritrea, and Somalia lies a broader reshaping of the regional balance of power in response to Ethiopia. As an emerging power in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia has raised concern over its regional ambitions, particularly its pursuit of access to the sea and its growing influence over maritime affairs. The regional security landscape is also undergoing significant change. Egypt is strengthening its military presence in Somalia as part of the African Union support and stabilization mission in Somalia, which has an authorized strength of nearly 11,800 personnel. Egypt's contingent officially comprises 1,091 troops compared with 2,500 Ethiopian soldiers. This deployment is complemented by a bilateral defense agreement signed in August 2024, as well as arms deliveries, military training, and joint military exercises. We need cooperation, solidarity, and development. It is in this spirit that Africa can move forward and become an indispensable player in global development for the benefit of its people and the international community as a whole. The Red Sea offers major economic and strategic opportunities for both Egypt and Somalia. In February 2026, Cairo announced a $1.1 billion luxury real estate project in Ain Sokna aimed at transforming the city into an international destination for conference, tourism, and yachting. Meanwhile, Somalia, located at the entrance to the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, has significant potential in the blue economy, port infrastructure, and hydrocarbon exploration. With more than 3,000 kilometers of coastline among the richest fishing grounds in Africa, the country is well positioned to capitalize on its maritime resources.
On to the regional news. In West Africa, ECOWAS adopts recommendations to accelerate infrastructure development. In East Africa, EAC launches new measures to modernize agri-food systems. And finally, in Southern Africa, SADC police chiefs call for united efforts against transnational crimes. The 5th ECOWAS Regional Forum on Public-Private Partnerships held in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire from July 8 to 10, 2026 concluded with the adoption of some 20 recommendations aimed at accelerating infrastructure development in West Africa. Participants notably advocated for the harmonization of regulatory frameworks, the strengthening of legal security for projects, the integration of environmental, social, and governance criteria, and the establishment of innovative financing mechanisms to attract more private capital. They also called for greater involvement of SMEs, young people and women in the value chains of infrastructure projects. These recommendations aim to promote resilient, inclusive and sustainable infrastructure to strengthen the region's economic integration and competitiveness. Meeting in Dar es Salaam for the 19th session of the Sector Council on Agriculture and Food Security, the ministers of the East African Community adopted several strategic measures aimed at accelerating the transformation of regional agri-food systems. They notably approved the Regional Investment Plan for Agri-Food Systems, regulatory reforms in agricultural production and animal health, as well as initiatives supporting youth mechanization and climate resilience. The ministers also called for increased investment, regional cooperation, and agricultural trade to sustainably improve food security, competitiveness, and trade within the region. Meeting in Lilongwe, Malawi for the 31st Annual General Meeting of the Subcommittee of Police Chiefs of the Southern African Development Community, Southern African Regional Police Cooperation Organization, SADC Police Chief adopted several measures to intensify the fight against transnational organized crime. They notably approved common procedures for the repatriation of stolen vehicles, a regional plan to combat livestock theft, and called for strengthened cooperation against cybercrime, financial crime, human trafficking, and wildlife trafficking. Participants also reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening intelligence sharing, collaboration with Interpol, and the harmonization of legal frameworks to ensure security and stability throughout the region. France and South Africa forge a new strategic partnership. The creation of a joint ministerial commission now institutionalizes their diplomatic, security, and economic relations through annual summits. Christian Bellabo.
The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa concluded a 3-day official visit to France on July 12, 2026. The trip was marked by the signing of a strategic partnership establishing a joint ministerial commission. This new body institutionalizes annual meetings to strengthen diplomatic, security, and economic ties. The visit to Paris and the Sommet also sought to dispel political misunderstandings that has affected relations between the two countries in the past. Despite mounting global geopolitical pressures, both nations have expressed a shared determination to build a common future.
La situation est plutôt positive.
I would say the situation is rather positive. I believe the French representatives, just like those from DIRCO, are sincere when they say that relations between the two countries are excellent. However, as you pointed out, a slight area of tension has emerged recently. South Africa is currently facing punitive measures from the United States. And although President Macron, during his visit to the G20 in Johannesburg, invited President Ramaphosa to attend the G7, which France was due to host, the United States unfortunately decided otherwise.
Les États-Unis en ont malheureusement décidé.
To overcome these diplomatic challenges, both countries are relying on a particularly strong historic economic foundation. Bilateral trade increased by 7.7% in 2025, reaching approximately $2.7 billion, driven by a remarkable 42.2% surge in South African export to France. Investment has also expanded significantly, with 30 French companies committing to invest around €1.1 billion in South African economy this year, in addition to the $7 billion invested since 2003.
Il s'agit du troisième partenaire.
France is South Africa's third most important trading partner with the European Union. Germany ranks first, followed by the United Kingdom, with France in third place. It is therefore a leading strategic partner for South Africa. Trade is mainly focused on the pharmaceutical sector and the supply of strategic minerals. On our side, we import these products, while France sources essential minerals from us, including manganese, iron, and gold. In addition, there are many other rare metals involved alongside major cooperation in the automotive industry.
Le fer et l'or.
While the automotive, pharmaceutical, and traditional mining industries remain the cornerstone of this partnership, discussions at the Elysee are already looking ahead to the industrial challenges of tomorrow in response to global climate imperatives. Decarbonization and sustainable development have emerged as the new priority areas of cooperation for the two heads of state.
Néanmoins, il reste une large marge de manœuvre pour développer d'autres axes.
Nevertheless, there is considerable scope to develop other areas of cooperation. I am convinced, for example, that President Ramaphosa will discuss with President Macron the commitments made by several European Union countries regarding the energy transition and the gradual phase-out of fossil fuels. For us South Africans, this is a rapidly growing industry of the future. The opportunities created by green growth are genuine drivers of job creation and economic recovery.
De véritables leviers pour la création d'emplois et la relance économique.
With the establishment of the Joint Ministerial Commission, France and South Africa now have the institutional framework needed to turn these environmental and industrial ambitions to concrete projects, further strengthening their position as major partners on the international stage.
Benin will host the 7th edition of the World Social Forum in 2026, marking the return of this international meeting to Africa after more than a decade. The country was selected by the International Council of the World Social Forum following a bid led by the Global Convergence of Land and Water Struggles West Africa, with the support of Beninese civil society, African and international networks, and the Beninese government. This choice recognizes the role of Benin and West Africa in the struggles for social, climate, and land justice, whilst highlighting the country's historical, cultural, and Pan-African heritage as a framework for dialogue between social movements worldwide. The Southern African Development Community is holding its 46th Ordinary Summit of Head of States and Government on 17th August 2026 at the Durban International Convention Center in South Africa, under the theme Resilient, Sustainable and Inclusive Industrialization through Infrastructure Development, Agriculture and Critical Minerals Transformation in the Pursuit of a Just World. The summit defines regional priorities regarding integration, economic cooperation and development. As the supreme decision-making body of the SADC, this meeting will focus on accelerating industrialization, agricultural transformation, infrastructure, and the development of critical minerals to strengthen the economic resilience of Southern Africa. From 15 to 17 September 2026, Banjul, the capital of Gambia, will host the inaugural annual conference of the ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority. The event will be held under the theme Competition, Policy and Market Integration within ECOWAS, Issues, Challenges and Opportunities. The conference will bring together competition authorities, policymakers, regulators, academics, legal practitioners, judges, development partners, and competition professionals from West Africa and beyond, marking the start of a continuous regional dialogue on competition policy within the economic community of West African states.
The Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, is strengthening its team with the appointment of Cynthia Gnassingbé-Essonam as Senior Advisor in charge of private sector engagement. With her extensive experience, her strategic mission will be to catalyze the participation of African businesses and boost investment within the vast continental market. Christian Bellabo.
Cynthia Gnassingbé-Essonam is among the rising figures of African economic integration, a Togolese expert in international trade and private sector development. She has established herself over the years as a key interlocutor between public institutions and the business community. Her career, built around investment promotion, public-private partnerships, and trade policy, has led her to the heart of one of the continent's most ambitious initiatives, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfTA.
Aujourd'hui, quand on parle de partenariat, c'est vraiment à l'échelle continentale.
Nowadays, when we talk about partnerships, we are really talking on continental scale. It's about connecting businesses in one country with those in another, and that's how we will be able to achieve the objectives of these major projects, the AfTA.
L'objectif de cet important projet qui est la ZLECAf.
Before joining the AfTA Secretariat in 2022, Cynthia Gnassingbé-Essonam spent several years promoting strategic investment at Togo Invest. This experience enabled her to develop strong expertise in investor mobilization, infrastructure project development, and public-private partnerships. Recognized for her deep understanding for African trade issues, she was recruited to the AfTA Secretariat headquarters in Accra, where she now applies her expertise to support the implementation of the world's largest integrated market across African countries.
Le travail est tellement grand qu'il faut commencer quelque part. Et d'abord, c'est vraiment la sensibilisation. Donc, comment amener...
It's a huge undertaking, so we have to start somewhere. And first and foremost, it's really about raising awareness. So how do we ensure that all stakeholders involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem are really aware of AfTA and the opportunities it offers? Let me give you an example. We have started working with business support organizations. And what's very important is the train-the-trainer aspect, because we need to be able to identify the right entry points in order to scale up the results we are aiming for on the ground.
Les bons entry points pour pouvoir amplifier ce que nous recherchons comme résultat sur le terrain.
Within the Secretariat, she leads the private sector engagement strategy, regarded as a key driver of the AfTA success. She coordinates dialogue between governments, businesses, chambers of commerce, and investors to accelerate the adoption of the agreement by economic operators. Among her major achievements are the establishment of the AfTA private sector platform, the launch of the African private sector hearings, and the strengthening of partnerships with business associations and financial institutions to facilitate intra-African trade and investment.
On ne peut pas adresser les problèmes de façon isolée. Il faut les adresser de façon intégrée.
We cannot tackle problems in isolation. We need to tackle them in an integrated way. So when we look at the various issues, such as access to finance, that means we need to talk to banks, we need to talk to DFIs, and we need to talk to insurance companies. When we talk about issues at the borders, it means we also need to build the capacity of custom authorities. When we talk about issues relating to training itself, to really empower women, whether in terms of digital literacy or financial literacy. It means we need partners who are capable of participating in these programs, which really need to be developed in an integrated way.
À pouvoir participer à ces programmes qu'il faut vraiment développer de manière intégrée.
For Cynthia Gnassingbé-Essonam, the success of the AFTA depends above all on the active involvement of the private sector. Her vision is on an Africa where businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, women entrepreneurs, and young people become the true driving force behind continental trade. She advocates greater access to finance, market information, and regional value chains, convinced that economic integration will only reach its full potential when Africa businesses are able to fully seize the opportunities offered by the continental single market.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for following this edition of the African Union Journal, prepared by the entire editorial team. Find the full program on our website, africa24tv.com, on the My Africa 24 app, and on all our social media channels.
On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank.